right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Josh Singer. My day job is I'm the DC Parks and Rec Community Garden Specialist. So I work on, building urban ag sites and farms and gardens and tool sharers and stuff, compost cooperatives but also I also work on a lot of other issues as well, such as food recovery. I definitely got into food recovery through composting, which is a form of food recovery. We're going to talk about all the different types of food recovery. I think most people are familiar with like food donations, but there's a lot of other food recovery things happening, options as well. Different ways. I mean, food recovery is just basically ways to tackle food waste and prevent it. We'll talk more about that in a second, but yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. As I was saying, if you just join, I'll have the chat box up. So if you have any like questions, feel free to type in the chat, and I'll check in before each slide. But if you have an urgent question, feel free to unmute yourself and talk as well. It's a pretty informal presentation, but I'm doing this presentation as part of the DMV Food Recovery Week. So this is something that I got into food recovery, or at least into organizing around food recovery. It's like 7 or 8 years ago, we started the DC Food Recovery Working Group, where it was a bunch of us working on compost and food banks and stuff, that realized everyone was working in their own islands and no one was like working together on bigger initiatives or cross promotion. So we got once a month we get together and update each other and work on different initiatives, which we'll talk about some of those. But one of the initiatives was doing a food recovery week, which basically just highlights, it's a whole week of events that highlights different, efforts and organizations and initiatives and things around food recovery, and hopes, and kind of helps, get you tapped in and educated. We are on the tail end. I think there's, 2 more events, maybe. There's one tonight. There's a documentary about Will Reed, I believe is his last name. He did this guy. It was an awesome guy that like basically lived off of dumpster diving for like many years, and he did a documentary about it. So check it out. It's actually at Leonard Gardens in Marvin Gaye Park in Ward 7 tonight. I think there's a Saturday event, but if you type in DMV Food Recovery Week, you'll see the full schedule. But we've started in the last couple of years. We started partnering with Manna Food Bank and Community Food Rescue in Montgomery County, who does a lot of great work. And even this year, we're working with I Hate Politics podcast, and we're kind of expanding our reach and our partnerships. So it's not just, we started out as a DC focused food recovery week, but now we're doing greater DC, including, DMV, including Montgomery County, especially. So welcome though, but today we're going to be talking about just, I did this class a long time ago, or I created this class, but I add tons of material every year because there's just so many new initiatives and efforts around food recovery. But the original purpose of this class was to kind of do an overview of all the types of food recovery, initiatives, actions, organizations, resources, assistance, across the greater DC area. So if you're new to food recovery, or if you've been here a while but you want to figure out how to tap in, different areas, this is a great presentation to kind of do a general overview. And if you know of some initiatives that I don't mention, feel free to share them as well, and definitely email me so I can include them, because I want to try to make this as comprehensive as possible. So it's like a lot of updating every year. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining. We can go ahead and get started. So this presentation is an hour long. This is a crazy table of contents. I'm not even gonna go through it, but we're just going to talk about resources and efforts and initiatives and laws and liabilities and policies and things like that, just to kind of give you a general crash course on food recovery in DC. So go ahead and we'll get started. So when we talk about food recovery, why are we recovering food? And there's a lot of stats out there on why. Actually, I'm going to turn off my video just so we don't capture that. Okay. So there's a lot of stats why we do out there, and these statistics, like any statistics, can be a little bit different, where who's doing it, but in general, these are kind of averages that I found through numerous stats. Is we waste about a third, anywhere from a third to 40% of all the food that we grow in the U.S. ends up going back to the dump. So that's a huge issue for many reasons. One is this this is what most of our dumps look like. And what we do is we bury this trash, and then we, seal it up. And then we have these little wells where, if you're familiar with composting, when you create anaerobic or areas that doesn't have oxygen, it actually creates methane gases, or greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide. And it's a huge source of pollution, for and particularly for greenhouse gases and climate change. So this is one reason why we want to stop sending organics to the dump. And another reason is there's enormous amount of food insecurity in DC, in this country, in the world. So we want to try to capture as much as that as possible, and get that to people. Like in DC, around 13% of households have some form of food insecurity. At the same time, we're throwing away billions of dollars of food into the dump. Some of these stats, they're a couple years old, but they're like, I've seen a bunch of stats that are pretty similar to this. But we waste. I mean, the average household wastes about $1,500 a year in wasted food. We waste, over 100 billion pounds. We're talking 161 billion annual cost of eating food. So it's not only bad for the environment, it's not only a tragedy because we have so much food insecurity. A lot of times it's not about, getting, grown enough food, but it's about making sure that, people have access to that food. And so that's where a lot of food recovery can help out as well. And I've really found this to be powerful because, we get this idea of food waste, it's like grocery stores and school cafeterias, which there's a lot of waste coming out of that. But actually, most statistics I found, our households are actually where we waste the most amount of food. We end up buying stuff and we throw them away before it's, it's bad, or we just don't get to it. So there's a lot of small things we can do as well. But at the same time, there's a lot of commercial and institutional changes that we can do to recover more food. And these statistics, they don't even touch the actual, production part and distribution part of food, which there's enormous amount of waste because, for some reason in our capitalist society, we want every single fruit to look exactly the same and be perfect and have no blemishes. And we throw away, a lot of times, perfectly good food doesn't even make it to our markets because people are worried that it's not going to sell because they may have a blemish or something. So so there's a lot of reforms that we need to be doing in our entire food system. So there's a question from Mary: do you have any stats on school food waste? I do not, but that would fall under institutional. So schools, hospitals, rec centers, community centers, things like that. So we're looking at about 8% institutional. I mean, personally, I've worked with a lot of schools in the DC area and it's enormous. One school in particular, I won't say the name, but they like milk is a big thing. Like milk lobbyists, force us to give every kid some milk whether they want it or not, and then it oftentimes gets thrown away. And there's one school that did a assessment on just their milk alone and found like they were throwing away like something like $40,000 in milk every year. So then that we were able to kind of match them with, I think it's Martha's Table was able to kind of capture that, and that they're able to get that back into the community. So,
well, John,
yeah.
Only reason why I said that is that Richmond City Schools, due to the COVID and kids coming back, they're having a big thing with keeping money intact, and they're wasting close to $30,000 a day of these prepackaged meals. I've also worked as a teacher for many years getting, mozzarella sticks with either mustard or ketchup, an apple, and I'm just wondering how those tax dollars are trickling. And one thing I've always been a part of is trying to push farm to school, but that's been a big thing. So that's why I was speaking on that, because if they're wasting, a school district's wasting $30,000 a day, and I've seen the kids throw it out. Like, I'm like, just give me your vegetables, I'll eat them.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to talk a lot about different strategies and resources around schools, because there's an enormous amount of waste for sure coming with schools, especially, I mean, since like in DC, and there's an effort to push this to start doing more, in-house cooking of meals, like DC bilingual, and then different schools are, getting, making their own meals again. But most of the meals, and at least in DC, are come from contractors like Cisco or a different one. And there, we've been connecting with them on just on the warehouse end. Like, they're throwing away thousands of meals because they have to over prepare, because they can't ever short a kid a meal. So they have to, buy thousands of meals, over prepare. So we've been working with DC Food Rescue, or Food Rescue US, to kind of capture all those extra meals. And yeah, the more packaged meals, especially if they're packaged, that, we'll talk about different ways that we can, recover those for sure. Cool, thank you. And definitely, yeah, Constance says, she works in the nursing home sector, and there are a lot of waste in their facilities for sure. So that definitely comes in institutional, it's an enormous amount of waste. And then we've seen that waste just kind of blow up. And not only that, we've seen, since the pandemic hit, but we've also seen just like how not functional in many ways our food systems are in this country. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have seen, you all have seen this, like the headlines when COVID first hit, there was like, especially when things started closing down, and the jobs market got hit, we started seeing an explosion of people trying to get food assistance from food banks. This is just one food bank. I mean, there was, pictures of lines of cars, for miles. And at the same time, you could, in the same newspaper of this article, you could also find farms that were just plowing in millions of pounds of produce, because their distribution network, was all industrialized, and centralized, and we started, as the restaurants started closing down and things like that, they lost the whole, distribution network, and all of a sudden they couldn't sell that, produce. So we just see these, millions of pounds of produce being tilled in. At the same time, we're seeing this huge, explosion of need to feed millions. So I think a lot of people kind of, this was, a wake up call of like the urgency of like getting a better food system, which could be, a lot of different things. Like, we saw explosion of people looking more localized, like CSAs. There was an explosion of CSAs, which is community supported agriculture, where you pay money to a local farm up front, and then you get vegetables once a week in a box. People are making more local connections with local farms and local food systems. They're growing their own. We saw explosion in urban ag since COVID hit. So a lot of people are trying to build more localized and more sustainable food systems since then. But a big part of that is recovering the waste that's already in their systems, and finding better ways to do that. So when I say food recovery, there's a lot of different ways that we can recover food. And EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, actually created this hierarchy to kind of show people with that, certain ways you want to really focus on, like, source reduction. Let's stop over ordering food. That could be like, that needs to be the first step. But also, let's get any food that's not eaten, all these extra meals at schools, let's grab those and get those to people that need meals. And if that food's gone bad, well, let's go feed those to animals. And if it's gone really bad, let's turn it into industrial products. Let's compost it. Let's and the last case scenario is let's send it to the landfill. So the hope is we avoid this one by going through this cycle. There's actually a local organization called the Local Institute of Local Self-Reliance. They have the word local in their name, so they're very focused on local. So they create a new hierarchy. It's a little bit more involved, but it's more localized, where they want you to do compost in your backyard or in a community garden before you send it and have it shipped to a big industry, centralized industry that may produce a lot of pollution, or may or could like a lot of these compost facilities end up closing down, because it's sometimes hard to do these in large scale centralized composting. So they there's a new one. So if you're more about local and you want to get a little bit more intentional, definitely check that one out. But the whole point is to kind of show you that there's certain things that we're trying to achieve over others. So a lot of us in DC have been working on different different parts of the hierarchy, from composting to food donations to source reduction. And we realized back in 2015 that everyone's working on their own island. No one's, working together, especially with things like legislation and policies that need to be changed. So we started meeting once a month. We formed the DC Food Recovery Working Group with the mission of not only cross-promoting and building awareness of what's going on, but also trying to build new initiatives and policies and things like that. And we've done everything from bringing DC's first food runner program, Food Rescue US. A big problem is like restaurants have food, but they don't have a way to get it to a food pantry. And this is an app that can connect volunteers with extra food, and even map out where the nearest food pantry is and stuff. It's a really cool program. I actually have a video I'll show you later of that. We worked together with Councilwoman Che's office, where we were able to pass the Save the Good Food Act, which I'll talk about in another slide, removing a lot of barriers to food waste locally. We made resource websites, resource guides, worked on shared table guidance, talking about schools. That's a big way that we can recover food at schools, shared tables, which I'll talk more about. So we've done a whole bunch of different initiatives. If you want to learn more, you can definitely check us out on our website, DC Food Recovery Working Group. There's a link right here, and we also have a Facebook. All right, so I want to kind of dive into DC food recovery. Well, we'll start with laws and liabilities and all that boring stuff. It's really not that complicated. We're really set up really well right now to donate food, because that's the first thing when you go to an organization and be like, let's can I have your food. The first thing they think is like, oh, gosh, I'm gonna get sued. If someone gets sick, if I donate this food and someone gets sick, I'm gonna get sued. It's really important to understand that will never happen because of the federal bill, Emerson Good Samaritan Law of 1996, which extends full liability coverage to anyone donating in good faith. Like if you purposely poison something, of course that's not gonna cover you, but if you're donating food in good faith to a nonprofit, or a church entity or a religious institution, you are completely covered from any liability. And no one has been sued for donating food, even if people have gotten sick, since 1996. I mean, there's still, we're going to talk about, food handling policies and stuff. There's still, and stuff. And we still want to be intentional about how we're storing food and donating food, but at the same time, you do not have to worry about ever getting sued. As long as you donate to like a nonprofit or a church, or a religious institution. And at the same time, there's all kinds of tax incentives. We have, federal tax incentives. Maryland and Virginia have their own state and tax incentives. And DC, recently is working on getting their tax incentives as part of that, the Save Good Food Act, which we passed, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but we're still working on that, getting that funded. But what the Save the Good Food law, so basically DC food policies just extends, reconfirms the coverage of the Bill Emerson Act. All of our food policies basically say, you're covered liability wise. And then, but there's one thing that especially with unserved food, so it's important. There's two kind of categories of food. There's unserved food. So think about you're in, at a school cafeteria. They all the food they put on dishes and give to the students, that's served. So we can save some of that stuff, as long as it's non-hazardous, like if it's in packages or if it's like fruit or something like that, you don't want to like save, spaghetti that's been served, because that's probably, lots of germs at that point. But the food that hasn't been served, that's completely okay, as long as it's, still on, temperature control and stuff. You can definitely donate that without even, without a second thought. You're completely covered. But the food that is served, so that there is another way to recover some of that, as I said, and that's called shared tables. And the shared table, we'll talk more about that later, but that's basically where if there's extra food that's that's safe, it's in packages, or it's fruit, banana has their own natural, package. You can actually save that. A lot of times they have actual tables that you can put it on the table, and then students can grab it and take it home with them. Or it's a more metaphoric table where they just, take it back to classrooms and give it to anyone. Like my daughter, every day comes home with full of like, milk and stuff in her backpack where she grabs, she doesn't want it to go waste. So and that's important to understand, but there's certain things, if there are potentially hazardous, like milk, if you're going to do milk, you need to actually get a Department of Health, DOH, what's called a variance, where basically it's just an application to show saying that, hey, we actually have a refrigerator or cooler, we're going to keep this milk cool, we're not just going to let it sit out in the sun all day and then send it home. We're actually going, so if it's anything like that, like milk or something that could be hazardous if it's not stored well, you will need a DOH variance, which is super easy to get. But for most things like apples and packaged food, that's pretty easy to give away. And if you want to, we actually worked with the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic to capture all this legal stuff I just talked about into this guidebook called Food Recovery in DC Legal Guide. So if you want to dive deeper into any of this, or you want actual links and language from legislation, definitely check out. Or it's on the website. You can download it as a PDF, and it's got all this information. But I want to cover again about recovered shared tables and what we can recover and we can't recover. So we're going to do a really quick activity looking at these 3 meals. Can people type in the chat or say out loud things that we can cover? We can recover on the shared table. So what are a couple things, if people can type in or say out loud, what can we recover from these meals? Yeah, oranges for sure. Oranges have their own, wrapping. We can definitely cover oranges and most fruit we can recover.
The cheese stick.
Definitely the cheese stick, as long as we have it. That may need a DOH variance because you'll need to prove that you have a refrigerator or a cooler to keep it cool, but you can definitely recover the cheese stick.
And are those Bosco sticks at the bottom?
I don't know. Yeah, it's something, but that again.
Each school has a different one, because I actually, as a teacher, ate school lunch for 1.5 years at 2 different schools. And some schools serve the same lunches. It's pizza, hamburger, cheeseburger, taco salad.
Yeah.
And then once a week, they have a hot meal. When I was at another school district, they had a hot meal each day, also a microwave, and we were trying to apply for a salad bar. So the kids had a difference. So what ends up happening is that we have actually people or some kids who are entrepreneurs, and they sell honey buns. And they have a backpack full of honey buns and Skittles and Sour Patch Kids, and that's their hustle. Sometimes their parents might have food stamps and they're getting that stuff. They go to Costco and they get it, and they're bringing home 20 or 30 bucks a day. Now, I'm not mad at them for their entrepreneurism, but look what they're doing with vending machines now, with businesses where they're providing healthy snacks. What would happen if we would work it that way?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I'd love to jump in that conversation. And we could talk about for a while. But we do only have a short amount of time. But I do want to, I mean, that was perfect what you said about, honey buns and all these things that are in their own prepackaged wrapper, they don't need to be refrigerated, are perfect examples of things that we can store, like these cookies, these brownies, things like that. So yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah. But I also want to show, like, there's certain things we can't recover, like chicken nuggets, barbecue sauce, hash browns, broccoli. These are things that, people have breathed on. So you're probably, having bacteria and stuff on there. That's considered served food. So we definitely want to avoid that. But, oh, yeah, thank you all so much. All right, so local food recovery legislation. So I want to talk about a few different laws and legislation that surround food recovery in this area. The first one was the 2014. It's the Sustainable Solid Waste Management Amendment Act. The only things you really need to understand about that is it created this Office of Waste Diversion and DPW. So this is a District of Public Works. They're in charge of trash hauling. So they actually have a division that's working on recovering, or they're working on zero waste initiatives, and a big part of that is food recovery. They have, we'll talk about this later, but they set up compost pickup sites at different farmers markets across the city, and they're working on different, a larger street, we're so far ways off, but they're working on, large scale, compost facility, something that can do street, compost pickups and organic pickups. And then the 2017, so this is the Good Save the Good Amendment food, Save Good, you're supposed to be Save Good Food Amendment, left out the food act. So we worked with Che's office to get this passed, and it does 4 really cool things. One, it provides a tax credit. It's not yet funded yet, but it provides a tax credit for, people donating healthy food. That's really important because if you talk to a lot of food banks, they're overwhelmed with things like sheet cakes and like food that, yeah, they're appreciative of it. And it's not like, it's not like we have to not donate any of this stuff, but they're overwhelmed with junk food. So so there's actually a credit where if you start, donating vegetables and healthy food, you can actually qualify for this credit. And another thing it does, this is one of my favorite parts, it expands the liability protection for food donors to donate directly to individuals. So, say like there's a school and they have all this extra food, well, they need a nonprofit middle person to be qualified under the federal, Good Samaritan Act. So they have to, donate to a nonprofit, and then that nonprofit finds the people, food pantry, and finds people to give it to. But instead, this actually extends the liability coverage where organizations can donate directly to people in their community. So if we can do, like if like a school wants to do like a pop-up, food pantry where they, once a week they give away all their extra food to people directly in the community, they can now do that because the liability coverage has been extended. There's also DOH. We're going to talk. The next slide is going to be about date labels. Date labels. There's a couple important date labels, but most of them are ridiculous. We'll talk about why in a second. But they prevent a lot of food donation from happening. A lot of good food, because the date labels are more about making companies as much profit as possible, rather than as an indicator that food's gone bad. And in DC, I suppose in many other states, it's by law you can't donate, food that's past their best by date, or used by date, even if the food's still good. So we actually were able to overturn that, where you can start donating food, and we'll talk more about why that is important on the next slide. And then the last thing is it requires Department of Environment, or Department of Health, and Department of Public Works waste diversion team to create a food donation guide for all of our businesses. And they just did this just a couple months ago. They finished this. And this is really important because a lot of times we come into these restaurants and we're like, hey, you're all right, you can donate. No one will sue you. And they're like, who are you? Like, get out of here. But I mean, this is an actual guide written by the Department of Health that talks about everything that we try to promote. So and their food inspectors are trained on it. They can train restaurants on it, and it's a way where people feel a lot more comfortable now, instead of just talking some random guy like myself. And then a couple other ones, like home composting incentives amendment. So this is kind of like it was passed in 2018, and it's part of DPW does this, where they actually train people to do home composting programs, and they'll give you a rebate program if you buy like a home composting like tumbler or worm bin or something like that. So and the Institute of Local Self-Reliance does these trainings. You have to take a training, and then you can qualify for a rebate. Definitely check that out. It's a really great program. And then the last thing, this hasn't passed yet, but there's been a federal initiative that started in 2016 to actually create a national date labeling standard, which will, this is a good segue into the next slide. So someone asked, do you have a link for the commercial food donation guide? Yeah, it's that zero waste link down here. If you go to zerowaste.dc.gov, this is managed by the Office of Waste Diversion. You can find, all the information on their, compost training programs, compost pickups, their guides. But this is the full link, and there's actually multiple languages in that guide. Yeah, I can't drop it, but if you want to screenshot this, or I can, once I'm done with the presentation, if you remind me, I'll drop the link into the chat. Cool. So let's talk about date labeling: the best by, sell by, use by, best if used by. So very confusing. And at one time it wasn't a legitimate effort to base, create a federal. In the 70s, there was a movement to create a federal standard, based on science and health, warning people when food was likely to go bad, to try to prevent any kind of illnesses and things like that. They tried to pass a national federal law standard in the 70s. They could not pass it, so it was kicked back to the states. And it was basically the federal government was like, we'll let every state decide on their own what they want to do and how they want to do it. And the states were like, we don't know, we don't want to do this. So they kind of just kicked it to the corporations themselves who are making these products get to decide what labels they want and what standard they're used by. And so that's when we saw a shift from health and science to peak brand, protection and to, peak, and brand integrity, where they're not so much concerned. Like milk is ultra pasteurized. Like even though milk tastes disgusting when it's bad, you're not going to get sick from it. You may gag on it, but you're not going to get like some horrible virus from spoiled milk. But they put these sell-by dates, and that's not, that's for that date isn't when it goes bad. It's when it's like it starts losing its peak freshness. So it's still good for another. I mean, I'd drink milk for a week or two after the sell-by dates, and then when it starts getting it's nasty, I'll pour it down the drain. But but the thing is, it's not about they're not trying to predict when it gets nasty. They're trying to predict when it's the best quality possible, and then when it starts to slowly very smallly get you lose the freshness, they want you to throw that away and go buy another one. And that's, so that, was basically the standard, even though they use different language across the country. I mean, there are some really important ones like baby formulas, like, shellfish and stuff and like fish, and meats and things like, there's some good standards for that stuff. And most of this stuff like bread and milk and like all, canned foods, I mean, these labels don't have a whole lot of significance. It's more about just making more money and also encouraging food waste. So, and what's worse about this is like roughly half the states in this country, including DC, until say the Good Food Act, have by law you can't sell or donate food that's gone bad. So that's that's what's even worse about this is like there's always videos of people just like at grocery stores dumping thousands of gallons of milk each week because it's still good, but they can't even donate it to a food pantry because of by law. So that's why there's been a movement to try to overturn it, that state by state. But then there's also been a movement on the federal level to just like get rid of all of this and have. I mean, I still think we need to have date labeling, but it needs to be based on science and health, and not about, and it shouldn't be created by the corporations themselves. But cool, thank you, Mary. Mary found the zero waste page. For the commercial food donation guide. All right, so let's talk about donating food. This is definitely not a comprehensive list, but these are some of our key players in DC and then there's some Manna Food Bank in Maryland, Arlington Food Assistance in Virginia. But these are most of these like are some of the key nonprofits in DC that you could donate to that do a lot of like food pantry work and a lot of food work. You can, if you go to our website, dcfoodrecovery.org, you can see, food donation. You can actually see all these mapped out on a map, so you can find the closest one to you. We definitely encourage never just like show up at some place. Always call ahead of time, find their hours, find out if they're taking prepared food. Some places only take, canned food. Some places will take prepared food, and especially after this pandemic, a lot of these places. Because I run some farms and we do veggie giveaways, and we always have extra veggies, and we used to just take them to food pantries. But a lot of these places, food banks, since the pandemic hit, they're only out health precautions. They're only taking packaged stuff. So you want to call ahead of time, get your information straight, and then start dropping off. So there's some resource maps as Food Recovery, and then there's one Aunt Bertha, which is this awesome site where you can find local food pantries and different food assistance programs and resources as well. So John asked, can you make these slides available? I will definitely make these slides available for sure. I could definitely do that. And if for some reason you don't see these in the next week, feel free to email me and I'll send those to you. And then I really love what's you know this whole movement of mutual aid network that's really blown up since the pandemic hit, and this is really just like localized, really starting grassroots, social safety nets that they're emerging community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, where it could be as small as just like you going to all your neighbors, a couple neighbors on your street and checking in with them, to larger food drop off donation centers and things like that. So this really blew up. There's we have the DC Mutual Aid Network. They have a great Facebook group you can join to get updates. But this is a great way to, if you have extra food or if you want to volunteer and help with food donations and food, deliveries. And it's not just food, especially like baby products, diapers and things like that is in high need. Or if you just want to make cash, donations as well. And if you want a very effective, low overhead, way to donate and make a difference, check out these organizations. You got, this great, you can call them or, you can email them on all these. And there's, even more outside. I should have but the Montgomery County ones and the Virginia ones, but you can definitely, if you just type in mutual aid and wherever you are, you'll Google will find them. And then another, even a smaller, more localized level is we've seen, explosion of community fridges across the country, and particularly in DC, there's been two organizations that have been, leading this charge. DC Community Fridge, DC Fridge Collective is a all volunteer cooperative that basically or collective that puts these organizes these community fridges outside community centers and storefronts where they just need an outlet, and then they'll get a fridge out there, make it super pretty. Sometimes they'll put a shelter with some dry storage, and then anyone can drop off food and anyone can pick up food. So it's a very great localized area. We drop a lot of produce off from our farms at these centers. But you definitely, again, you want to check them out, before you go. Some of the information is not, a little old, these volunteer efforts, sometimes there's like one site that I thought had a refrigerator and didn't. So it's nice to know this stuff ahead of time. But there's a great map. If you follow them on Instagram, you can get updates. And then there's another great organization called Feed the Fridge. So this is actually restaurants. It's different restaurant groups that I believe started this. You can check out the whole story at feedthefridge.org. But it's basically, it's a two-pronged effort. One is they buy prepared meals from restaurants that are struggling, local restaurants, and then they take those prepared meals and they put them in refrigerators, free refrigerators, at rec centers and community centers across, and there's a map here. So you can actually get full, really great prepared meals for free at any of these sites. So definitely check them out. I don't think you can donate to these sites, but if you know people that are struggling and can use the assistance, definitely let them know about this. And then, like I said, one of the biggest obstacles sometimes is transportation. Like a lot of people have food, but they don't have a way to donate the food. So that's where my favorite is like DC Food Rescue US or Food Rescue US. It's a Connecticut organization, that food app. It's an app that you download, and then you can either say, hey, I have extra food. Can someone come pick it up? Or you can say, hey, I want to volunteer, and you'll get alerts, being like, oh, at this time there's going to be some extra food, and it needs to go, 2 blocks over to this food pantry, and then you can claim that, or you can, if you're busy, you can ignore it. Like I'll do runs on my lunch hour, and it literally takes like 10-15 minutes. It's very organized. And you can just, you just transport a bunch. This is one of my runs. It was like the 6 and I synagogue that had all this extra holiday food, and I just took it to a food pantry that was like 5-minute drive away. And other ones too. Means Database is another great organization where you can post extra food, and those alerts go out to actual organizations like food banks and stuff, and they can come and pick it up as well. And then Care to Feed Foundation is for restaurants only, but if you have a restaurant, they'll help you transport your extra food as well. And then Montgomery County, they their food runner programs, Community Food Rescue, is an amazing organization that has been here for a long time. They do great work. Check them out if you're in Montgomery County and want to get involved. And then And then and then there's like larger assistance. These like the Capillary Food Bank and DC Central Kitchen. They have truck crews, but they're not going to come to like your your barbecue and pick up extra food. They're going to come to like grocery stores and pick up pallets of extra food. But if you do have that, or that, definitely check that out, and they'll be more than happy to pick stuff up. They're just a large crew, so they're not going to, they're only going to say pick up large stuff. So Mary Williams says, "Feed the Fridge is in my yoga studio." Nice, yeah, they're so amazing. That's the one good thing about this pandemic is we just saw an explosion of amazing, awesome, initiatives and organizations and mutual aids and stuff. So, and Feed the Fridge is definitely one of those. So I'm going to play a quick video on Food Rescue US. This is from the old director of TBW, actually did a run. So this is kind of what it looks like to do the run if anyone's interested. And the site manager is down here for DC if you ever want to get involved or need more info.
I just pulled up in my DC truck and I'm ready to pick up some food. All right, let's do it.
The mission of Food Rescue US is to recover healthy excess food from businesses that would otherwise throw it away and connect it to agencies that need the food. And we use volunteers who consult our high-tech app to find the food runs. So all they do is literally shop for an opportunity to make a difference.
And I also have one case of fruit.
Cool enough. All the runs are indicated, all the instructions are here, and then we drop it off at the Latin American Youth Center.
I work at the Latin American Youth Center. We serve individuals who are 18 to 24 years old experiencing homelessness. They have limited supply of food, and sometimes their only meal comes from us at the drop-in center.
Thanks to Mayor Bowser's leadership here in Washington, D.C., we have a goal of diverting 80% of our waste. One of the reasons I love this program in particular is that we get to do two things: fight hunger and fight food waste.
Part of this pitch always is to get more food runners and to encourage volunteerism.
All right, good to meet you.
All right. So I can't talk enough about how amazing this organization is. Literally, if anyone's like, "Oh, I have extra food, but I can't," no. Like go to Food Rescue US, someone will come pick it up. But at the same time, they're always looking for volunteers. So if you want to get involved and you want an easy way to get involved, a non-committal, you'll send alerts and you can choose, you can turn alerts off, or when you can choose what you want. It's just a great way to kind of, definitely recommend. This is one of the easiest ways to get involved with food recovery in DC. And then food recovery for businesses. We talked a lot about these different organizations, transportation help. This is a really great organization that shut down recently, but I wanted to just mention it, like selling extra meals. It's called Last Call for Food. It was an organization that basically worked with restaurants, and when a lot of times they'll pre-make meals, but then if they don't sell them all or serve them all, they'll sell them for super cheap through this app that they created. And they did recently shut down, but I definitely want to encourage, if anyone's interested in taking the helm, or if you know of new organizations like that start, please let me know, because it's a great way to decrease food waste at restaurants. There's compost businesses that will come pick up your compost. There's rendering services that that will pick up your vegetable waste, all your oil waste, and turn it into biofuels and stuff like that, and that's like free services. I'm pretty sure they don't even pay you. Because they're making a profit off this stuff. There's food waste apps where you can actually go in and they'll, EPA has some free ones, or spoiler alert, and they'll actually help you order more correctly. Stop over ordering as well. And then there's all kinds of guides as well. So someone's saying Too Good to Go is great. Oh, what is Too Good to Go? See, it's an app where people can buy reduced price leftover food from restaurants that post at the end of the day. Wow. So it's just like, Last Call for Food. That's DC, right?
Yeah, they have released in San Francisco, New York, and DC, I believe.
See, this is why I kept that that organization. I wanted to find another one. It's working in DC. That's great. I can't wait to check them out. Yeah, and you can get like amazing food for super cheap. You know, like it's a really great app. So I'll definitely check that out. Too good to go. Thank you for sharing that. I want to say real quick, a lot of times we want to support organizations that are actually doing good work, you know, and so there's an organization called Food Recovery Network. They have over 200 chapters across the country. They work with colleges to recover, you know, cafeteria food waste. So they have a program where if you're actually doing good work, you can qualify, you know, you can apply and they'll vet you. And then if you're legit, they'll give you, they'll verify you. It's like called Food Recovery Verified. And that's really great. I'd love to start bringing attention to that, because then you can start, you know, if you care about food waste and food insecurity, you can start, you know, putting your dollars at the you know, taking them to the organizations actually doing stuff. And because I mean, tax incentives and stuff and rebates are great, but really, like, it'd be great to bring more business to these organizations that are actually taking the extra effort to, you know, recover their food. So definitely keep an eye out. They don't have too many in DC, but I think they're working on, you know, trying to build this up. There's a lot of great businesses as well, you know, from Imperfect Foods and Hungry Harvest. You know, like they actually, like, Imperfect Foods is a delivery service for food that's it's a lot of different ways, but for groceries and not just food that normally, like, it's been discontinued or it's about to go waste or something like that, and they've recovered it. It's perfectly good, and you can get it for real cheap. And Hungry Harvest is actually a CSA form where they can, you know, you can actually get you know, like lean food and things that normally would be wasted. Still really perfectly good food, but it's like half the cost as normal stuff. So definitely great. Also, but you know, also support your local farms and as well. But these are also great options to do, you know, as you know, all together. And then, like, keep an eye out for like Fruit Cycle makes, you know, fruit snacks. They use returning citizens to actually glean local orchards, and then they, you know, process it and make, you know, great food snacks. It's a really great organization. And Misfit Juicery makes juices out of stuff that wouldn't, you know, normally be thrown away. So definitely keep an eye out. School. So we had some, you know, some talks about school. So I want to talk about a couple of school options. Shared tables. So shared tables, it wasn't technically illegal or not legal until like a couple years ago when we worked with Department of General Services to actually create actual guidance and policies around that. So now it's 100% legal. You can, you know, like I said, it's basically, you know, save the fruit and packaged food. If you're going to do things that can go bad, you know, just make sure you have refrigeration or it can even be a cooler, you know, or something like that, and get that DOH variance if you're going to recover like cheese or milk. And there's a really great organization you can actually hire to set up. You know, DC Food Project is a great nonprofit. They do a lot of food donations and giveaways and stuff, but they also do shared tables, and they do really nice tables, which I really like, because sometimes this could be, you know, it could be stigmatized, you know, if it's just like this nasty table with extra food, and you know, like, so they want to make it into like this, like, you know, warm kind of like, you know, market looking kind of thing that people are more likely to grab. And what's great about this is this table, I mean, I'll sit around with extra food, you know, all day, and people anytime, you know, if you have a hungry student, they can, you know, they can go and grab an apple, or they can take the food home with them. It's a really great organization. And then DCPS, that has a lot of great, you know, programs around recycling and composting. There's different nonprofits in the area that can help set up, you know, different, you know, food recovery programs, colleges as well, like Food Recovery Network, and Campus Kitchen is like DC Central Kitchen one, which I think Food Recovery Network, I think was buying or something like that, or maybe I'm mixing up organizations. And then, yeah, transportation, pop-up pantries and things like that. But I mean, the main thing with schools is, like, a lot of times you need to have an advocate on the inside. Whether that's a parent or a teacher, and once you have that person, and have that person kind of present to the administration and be like, hey, I want to, you know, bring DC Food Project in there, or hey, I want, you know, I want to set up a you know, table on my own, or hey, I want to, like, you know, capture all the extra milk that's not being served, and I want to take that to the local pantry. So a lot of times you need like an advocate on the inside, but once you do, you know, it's pretty easy to, especially since we have the guidance and we have the actual policies and all this stuff. It's like, you know, above the radar now. So yeah, but definitely let us know if you're struggling with a school. We know a lot of people that can kind of help with that. So Mary says, can you collect the fruits, then make a fruit salad for these situations? Yeah, you could, you know, You just, when you do that stuff, you just want to make sure you have like a commercial kitchen or something. If you or if you make it part of some kind of program as well, you just want to have any kind. If you're going to be preparing food, for people with this recovered food, you still have to act. At the very least, you need to take a food handling license. But then if it's going to,
No, it would be well, they don't call it home ec, but everybody knows it as home ec, but it's family consumer sciences. I teach home health and nutrition and beginning culinary one. So my culinary one students will have food safety license, and this is something that they could package. What I'm saying is, instead of them throwing out all the food that I was telling you at lunch, well, maybe if we can make a fruit salad and make it look pretty, because everybody likes stuff to look pretty. But maybe they can do that. That's what I was thinking of.
yeah, that would be great. And I know there was like something in that, I think the Save Good Food Act or another piece of legislation that was actually allowing people to sell recovered food too. So you're talking about entrepreneurship. I mean, they could, I don't know exact language. I could probably find it for you. But if you're interested in actually making, products that you want to sell too, as well from recovered food, that used to be illegal, but I'm pretty sure there's some legislation now that supports that.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you. All right, gleaning programs. And gleaning is just a fancy word for going to like a farm, and because farmers, I mean, they have peak sales, times that they want to get their food from the market, and then all during their off times, off seasons, it may not be worth the cost of like hiring labor to like pick the food and take it to a market and send all that stuff. So oftentimes what they'll do is they'll just till in that stuff, recover the nutrients into the soil and just regrow again. But if you can connect with them, you can actually get out there and harvest that stuff with volunteers and then take it to a food bank. And these are all lists of all the organizations that run gleaning programs in the area. Even though I should take this out. I know Iona Senior Services, they had they used to do an awesome senior free market from glean, farmers market, because it's not just farms, you can also glean farmers markets as well. Because a lot of them, if they don't sell the stuff, they don't want to take it back because they're not going to do anything with it. So as long as it's for a good cause, you can usually convince people to donate that. I think Iona is not doing it anymore, but the rest of these, are all, if you'd like to get involved. And some of them, like Arlington Food Assistance and Bedford City, they'll actually have events where they'll take, they'll transport people out to a nearest farm and do a bunch of gleaning. It's really cool. And then, Food Recovery Network actually made a gleaning guide. If you want to start a gleaning program for a farmer's market or farm, you can check that out. Hungry Harvest, as well, does gleaning, for a lot of their produce. I think they glean at different times, not just farms, but also at distribution places and factories and stuff. Because sometimes you'll get like avocados and things that are grown locally in Hungry Harvest, and that's definitely like more capturing food waste during the distribution, but it's still a form of gleaning. And then there's dumpster diving, the most localized form of gleaning. And like there's actually like we actually, the first year we did DC Food Recovery Week, we actually had a dumpster diving 101 class from this co-op house. Actually, for a brief time they did a dumpster diving CSA, because they would dumpster dive so much food and then they would give it away in the CSA form. They're really cool people. And they took some of us dumpster diving. They did a whole class, and there's a lot of ethics to it. Like you don't want to like dumpster dive. Dumpster diving is basically, going to like mainly grocery stores, and certain ones are better than others, like Trader Joe's. They are really good at separating things that spoil from things that don't. So you can stay completely clean. You don't have to like jump in the dumpster. You can find really great stuff. It's basically like, so when things go in trash, it's actually it's considered public property at that time. So you're not, so that's good to know. So don't throw a bunch of important things in your trash can. I think I don't know how it is on personal property, but I know on commercial property, it is legal. I mean, but not a lot of places frown upon it. So you need to know ahead of time where to go. And also at the same time, they talked a lot about like, a lot of unhoused people, homeless people, rely on these dumpsters at certain areas. So you don't want to dumpster dive in an area that may have a lot of homeless people. You want to find so we would, when they did the field trip, they took us out to Tyson Corner, where there was like Whole Foods and a Trader Joe's, and there wasn't anyone else competing, for it. Like we didn't see anyone that whole night, there. And the Whole Foods was, I mean, they separate produce and things, but the Trader Joe's is where it's at. There was like a whole dumpster full of cut flowers, because Trader Joe's model is like this small grocery store, so that so they have to like get rid of things as quickly as possible, and lots of packaged food. I mean, we pulled out, like I said, we filled a whole minivan full of cut flowers alone, and then the food, I mean, there was very little that was actually spoiled. Most of it was really good and still in their package food. So definitely something to think about. But I wrote this like dumpster diving tips if you want to get into it a little bit more. Food safety, I definitely recommend taking a food safety class. Everyone should take some kind of food safety class. You're going to be serving food, even if it's just like a barbecue. But general rule of thumb is like, I try to get, when food's refrigerated or when it's on, those little burners, it's fine, but at certain temperatures, but when it's off food, when you're actually transporting food, my general rule of thumb is to try to get it to where it needs to go within an hour. And that covers any outside temperature, any condition, all that stuff. Even if you use insulated bags, you can buy more time. If it's cool out, if it's a hot summer day, don't exceed an hour. But if it's cool out, you can go up to 2 hours. I just think it's safe just to stay at an hour. Get that food, where it needs to go within an hour. And let's say like you just can't do it, and some you're at barbecue and it was sitting out for a couple hours. That's fine. Just like tell the people there, it's like, hey, just a heads up, this was sitting out for a couple hours. You may, if you're going to use it, you may want to cook it thoroughly, just to make sure, so that's fine as well. But yeah, just to make it as easy as possible, donate that food within an hour, and you're good on food safety. But if you want to learn more, I definitely recommend food safety tips. Actually, Manna Food Bank and Community Food Rescue has really great video tutorials that are only a couple minutes long, and again, they can explain the process a little bit better as well. So check out that link to get more food safety. And then composting. So we have a lot of different ways to compost. I oversee a DC Parks and Rec. We do compost cooperatives where we built these rat-proof and smell-proof compost bins, and we organize them into co-ops, where self-sustaining co-ops where communities can manage them themselves. And we have 56 across the state, or across the city, you could join. You have to get trained, and you have to help process the compost like an hour a month. But then you can drop off all the food scraps you want, and you can make really great compost for local gardens and for your own garden. Or you could pay people to come pick it up. Compost Cab, Compost Cure, all these organizations that have for like $20 a month or something like that, they'll come and pick up food from you. TPW has a free farmers market drop off, or they have one farmers market in all 8 wards. You can go and just drop off your food scraps for free, and then they either take it to our co-ops or they take it to a larger compost facility. Same with Alexandria has farmers markets, has composting drop-offs. Mom's Organic is such an amazing grocery store, but they have this whole recycling center where you can drop off blue jeans, light bulbs, batteries, but they also have food bins where you can, for free, you can drop off your food scraps if you shop there regularly. There's different organizations that can help, build compost bins for you, like Loop Closing, Love and Carrots. And then there's, we do a lot of composting, and the ISLR does a lot of composting or, trainings. And since the pandemic hit, we've been, recording a lot of these. So you can definitely check out, if you'd like to do your own composting, you can check it out as well. And like USDA, USDA just started a new urban ag division a couple of years ago, and they really they're trying to get a lot of money towards urban agriculture development. And just recently, in last year, they've been starting to do funds for composting as well, if you're looking for funds for bigger projects. This is something we've been working on for unfortunately, like COVID hit, but we wanted to create a data a compost data app where people, for compost cooperatives, where people can weigh how much, food scraps they drop off, and you can actually, keep your stats of how many food scraps you are. You can compete against people to see who's the biggest composter. Sites can compete it. It's a really cool app, and we did it, we did it for like 5 sites, and then we did a trial. We have all kinds of feedback, and we're in the middle of releasing a contract to finish that, finish the app, and then COVID hit and our budget was frozen. So we're hoping, we're still waiting for most of our budget to come back. It should be coming back soon, and then we're going to complete this app, which I'm pretty excited about. There's a lot of great websites. So it is 1 o'clock. I probably have a couple more minutes left. I'll wrap this up really quickly if you want to stay, but it's all right if you have a hard deadline at 1, no worries. But there's a couple really great websites you can use to find local pantries. Ample Harvest is great. Eat or Toss is a great educational site that if you want to learn about when food is so good or not good, and there's a lot of tips on not wasting food at home. There's lots of great places for recipes for leftover foods, a lot for business apps as well. So this is a big one, organic waste ban. So this is a great way to develop your infrastructure for composting, is by initiating this ban, because this ban basically says if there is in Massachusetts, if you live within, I don't know, like 100 miles from a compost facility, all businesses of a certain size has to use that compost facility. They can't just send it, I mean, there's lots of exemptions, and they don't want to hurt businesses, but if you're, larger scale stuff, it definitely fall on this. So that would be great to do that in DC, because if we did that, all of a sudden there'd be a huge incentive to open up more compost facilities, because you would have this continual business as well. So it's something that we've always talked about, as the next step, long term, like a 10-year plan for DC or something. There's a lot of great infographics and stuff if you want, especially around like how to store food, what needs to go in the refrigerator, what needs to go on your counter, all that stuff. It's confusing. So definitely, but I mean, you can check out all this stuff. Save the Food, EPA, Community Food Rescue, Seattle has all these great, infographics they did with their public utilities. So all that stuff you can find at the DC Food Recovery working group website. If you're looking for infographics for classrooms or for your I think it's great to have I have one on my refrigerator just reminding me of what goes in the fridge and what doesn't, because that's some of that stuff is confusing. We have pamphlets as well that you can if you want all this information, but I got a nice little paper pamphlets, so we have that at our website. There's a lot of great, links to learn more about overall, like ReFed and Further with Food, great organizations in RGC that do a lot of work around food recovery if you want to learn more. And yeah, that's basically it. This is my contact info. I could stick around for a little while if anyone has any particular questions. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining. So we'll record this and I can share the slides as well. And yeah, definitely check out, we still have, I think, like 2 more events. Like I have a movie night tonight, and I think there's an event tomorrow. I can't remember, for some reason I can't think of it. But yeah, like I said, I'll stick around for a little bit longer if anyone has any questions. But thank you all so much for joining. All right. Well, if no one else has anything, yeah, feel free. I mean, my email, reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. And yeah, everyone have a good weekend and take care, and talk to you. Yeah. Thanks for joining
Hey,
us.
Josh, I actually have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is the DC Food Recovery Working Group open for anybody to join, or do you have to be like a food provider or like?
No, anyone can join. Like we have like 300 or 400 people that not everyone joins our meetings. And we actually, since the pandemic hit, we haven't been doing monthly meetings. We do quarterly meetings now. But yeah, just send me an email. I'll sign you up. And what's great about, even if you can't make the meetings, there's a Google group listserv anyone can join. So if you want to hear about initiatives, or you want to need help promoting, or if you have extra food and you want to see if anyone can pick it up, yeah, we can definitely get you on that too. So just send me an email and I'll definitely get you linked up to that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
You too. All right, y'all. Well, have a good day. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this down. But yeah, take care.